Welcome back to C-SPAN's podcast, Extreme Mortman. In this episode, the rest of our conversation with Roxanne Roberts of the Washington Post about her recent article, The Political Sex Scandals That Threw the Nation into a Frenzy. This is a two-parter. Last week was part one. Now, part two. Back to our conversation with Roxanne Roberts. All right, now, President Bill Clinton and his relationship with former White House intern Monica Lewinsky. First, his denial of the relationship.
Now, I have to go back to work on my State of the Union speech, and I worked on it till pretty late last night. But I want to say one thing to the American people. I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank
you. That was January 26, 1998. And by the way, the purpose of that event was to talk about child care. First Lady Hillary Clinton also spoke. Now here's President Clinton again, half a year later, August 17, 1998, addressing the nation after grand jury testimony about his relationship with Ms. Lewinsky.
As you know, in a deposition in January, I was asked questions about my relationship with Monica Lewinsky. While my answers were legally accurate, I did not volunteer information. Indeed, I did have a relationship with Ms. Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong. It constituted a critical lapse in judgment and a personal failure on my part for which I am solely and completely responsible. But I told the grand jury today, and I say to you now, that at no time did I ask anyone to lie, to hide or destroy evidence, or to take any other unlawful action. I know that my public comments and my silence about this matter gave a false impression. I misled people, including even my wife. I deeply regret that.
Monica Lewinsky also talked with the grand jury. At one point, she was asked about a lunch she had with Bill Clinton's close friend, Vernon Jordan.
During this meeting, did he make any comments about your status as a friend of the president?
Yes.
What did he say?
In one of his remarks, he said something about me being a friend of the president.
And did you respond?
Yes.
How?
I said that I didn't, my grand jury testimony, I know I talked about this, so it's probably more accurate. My memory right now is I said something about seeing him more as a man than as a president, and I treated him accordingly.
Did you express your frustration to Mr. Jordan with the president?
I expressed that sometimes I had frustrations with him, yes.
Okay. And what was his response to you about after you talked about the president?
He sort of jokingly said to me, you know what your problem is and don't deny it, you're in love with him. But it was a sort of lighthearted nature.
Did you have a response to that?
I probably blushed or giggled or something.
President Clinton's Senate impeachment trial began on January 7, 1999. A week earlier, on January 1st, Monica Lewinsky published a book called Monica's Story. On March 8, 1999, Monica Lewinsky signed books in Harrods department store in London. In this clip, you don't hear her, but you do hear the photographers.
Hello. Yeah, just in front of the table, it'll be fine. In the middle. Monica. Monica, are you all right? Monica, to your right, please. Can I just say, gentlemen,
gentlemen, we're going to give you about for another 3 or 4 minutes.
Monica! Look out! Monica! Monica! To your right! Monica! Monica! Monica!
All right, Roxanne Roberts, Bill Clinton, and Monica Lewinsky.
This one is more complicated. It's probably also the most famous of all of them, clearly. It was something that gripped the nation for almost 2 years. I mean, I remember being in the middle of all of this, and it raised so many questions. Now, I will say two things that involve nuance. One is that growing up with some very devout Baptists, I am not a devout Baptist, but I knew some very devout Baptists, and I sometimes wonder if Bill Clinton's denial of having sexual relations with that woman had to do with some very specific ideas about what constituted sex at that time. There are some people who considered sex intercourse and everything else kind of fooling around, and which was always sort of interesting to me. My theory is that if the clothes are off, it's sex, but that's me. But I sometimes wonder if there are certain people who make moral exceptions by their own definitions of what they consider to be sex and poor behavior or more serious behavior. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about in terms of how Clinton might have thought about this. Now, the far more important one is that this relationship, as we now understand it, was clearly a very, very, very powerful man taking advantage of a very young woman. Now, she never denied that this was consensual, but as she has gotten older, she said that she has come to an understanding that it was an inappropriate relationship, not because of the infidelity, but because of the power imbalance between the two of them. She probably was in love with him to a certain degree. How could you not? I mean, Bill Clinton is an incredibly charismatic man, and the idea that the president of the United States would single you out for special attention, even if that special attention was sexual in nature. I mean, I fully understand how a 20-year-old could just be completely blown away by all of that and confused. And there's also, for a young woman, sort of the idea of having a very special, intimate relationship with somebody like that is a very heady thing, too. I mean, you don't think, oh, I'm being exploited by this guy. You think I must be incredibly special because he picked me. And I think we understand that now. I think we would now term that relationship quite differently than we did at the time. At the time, there was an incredible amount of shaming toward her. It was very interesting because Clinton is such a unique and fascinating political figure. And he survived this scandal. He survived the impeachment. He went on. He is still considered to be sort of a great and significant politician in American politics. She, on the other hand, was treated as if she was completely morally corrupt and that she had somehow done something wrong in entangling him in this situation. He gave an interview recently where he said he used that relationship as a way of sort of managing his anxieties. And he understands how bad that was now, and he regrets it, and my response was, yeah, well, guess what? A lot of people have anxieties. Most of them don't have sex with an intern to manage those.
Or take pills.
They don't usually pick a White House intern as a way of managing their anxiety. So I think we now understand that relationship is a little different from some of these other ones where the women were younger, but not this young, not this naive. The power dynamic was so vast between them that I think the world has come to be much more sympathetic toward Monica. And Bill Clinton it will always be part of his story. It will always be part of his history. But he did not lose a career over this.
I'm just going to ask you one question about this, and then we'll move on. You were at the Washington Post when this happened.
Oh, yeah, it was amazing.
Did you cover this, and what angles did you take?
I've always been a feature writer. So instead of the day-to-day incremental news, it was sort of, how should we think about this? What does this mean? The question of whether or not this was between Bill and Hillary, or and a betrayal of Hillary, or do we have a larger interest as citizens? It dominated almost 2 years, and the other thing about it is that this, more than any other of the scandals, entered into sort of pop culture. I mean, there were Monica jokes, blue dress jokes. This thing went on over and over and over and over. The beret, it was never ending. And it became, her name, the blue dress, the beret, they became instantly iconic sort of symbols of this story. So as America sort of tried to suss this out and figure out how we feel about it all, it was all around in inescapable ways.
Okay. Now we go to January 4th, 1995, the opening day of the 104th Congress, and the election of the first Republican Speaker of the House in 40 years, Newt Gingrich.
My daughters are here up there, Kathy Lubbers and her husband Paul, and Jackie and her husband Mark Zyla. And the person who clearly is my closest friend and my best advisor, and who, if I listen to her about 20% more, I get in less trouble, my wife Marianne, who's right up there.
Okay, Roxanne Roberts, why is Newt Gingrich on the list?
Well, again, more nuance. Newt led the charge in Congress to impeach Clinton about his infidelities. Now, he threaded this very carefully by saying it wasn't the infidelity, it was the fact that he had lied about it, and that was the crime, and that's why he should be impeached. But the reason that's so rich coming from Newt is that Newt had been carrying on during this entire time an affair with a young congressional staffer. And in a deposition in, I think, 98, I have to go back and double check, this young staffer, who is now his wife, they've been married for a very long time, said, yes, we've been having an affair for 6 years, which means that at the time he gave that speech about his closest friend and best advisor, he was sleeping with this young woman. So maybe she was, now his wife, who was his second wife, said that she had no idea this was going on. So she probably did think he, thought she was his best friend and closest advisor. She didn't know he wasn't also, his favorite sexual partner at the time.
Now let me just one question. Do we put any of this, using the word alleged, in front of any of this?
No.
Okay.
This was admitted in a deposition, and Newt, went along. There was no question that they were having an affair for a very long time. It was written about, rumored at the time, and then during a deposition it was confirmed. There was, Newt later on, Callista is a very devout Catholic, and he converted to Catholicism and later on sort of talked about his failures as a person. Now, the interesting thing, his reason for this was to say, I love my country so much and I worked so hard, and I made some poor choices. As if sort of being an exhausted patriot was a justification for infidelity. I'm a patriot and I'm frequently exhausted, and it has not occurred to me that this was one of the possible reasons for it. So I think, Newt allegedly left his first wife, who had cancer, for his second wife, and then cheated on his second wife. Now, I will give him this. This is the only scandal that resulted in not just marriage, but apparently a very happy marriage. Callista was ambassador to the Vatican and is now currently ambassador to Switzerland, I think. And they seem to have found a very happy outcome. They got the happy ending. It's the only couple that I would say got a happy ending out of all of this. So with all the trauma and the turmoil, at least for the two of these people, they ended up in what appears to be a very happy union. But at the time, it was Gingrich who was pounding away at Clinton's infidelity while he was having an affair.
It's interesting. You mentioned the happy ending to this, and I hadn't thought about this, but as I was going through the clips and researching this, you see when Newt Gingrich runs for president and in other political venues, Callista is with him, and it's a very loving connection between. He introduces her from the stage, and she was. There are clips we covered in C-SPAN of him on the campaign trail in Iowa. She's right there, among the farmers and so on. So they are a political couple with a happy ending. It's very interesting you say that.
It is a happy ending, and perhaps if Gingrich had had two unhappy marriages and then sort of met Callista, and we would be all cheering them on and saying how great it was that they found each other. The reason they're on this list for this scandal is that Gingrich, in his very, very strident criticism of Clinton and the belief, it was always bad, Newt was doing the same thing, arguably in some ways worse and different, but never acknowledging that. Again, it was one of those things that had the public known at the time, it would have completely changed the dynamic. This was sort of the Republicans went after Clinton as being morally corrupt, essentially. And so there's a lot of hypocrisy there. So the reason he's on this list for this sex scandal, when it was discovered that, in fact, that Newt had behaved in very similar ways, it created a lot of raised eyebrows.
Now, John Edwards. Here's the former Democratic senator from North Carolina and presidential candidate on Nightline, August 8th, 2008. This clip was played on C-SPAN's Washington Journal the next day. Bob Woodruff of ABC News asks John Edwards about an affair he reportedly had with Rielle Hunter.
In 2006, 2 years ago, I made a very serious mistake, a mistake that I am responsible for and no one else. I, in 2006, told Elizabeth about the mistake, asked her for her forgiveness, asked God for his forgiveness. And we have kept this within our family since that time. All of my family knows about this. And just to be absolutely clear, none of them are responsible for it. I'm responsible for it. I alone am responsible for it. And it led to this most recent incident at the Beverly Hilton. I was at the Beverly Hilton. I was there for a very simple reason, because I was trying to keep this mistake that I had made from becoming public.
I know this is a very difficult question, but were you in love with her?
I'm in love with one woman. I've been in love with one woman for 31 years. And she is the finest human being I have ever known. And the fact that she is with me after this having happened is a testament to the kind of woman and kind of human being she is. There is a deep and abiding love that exists between Elizabeth and myself.
By the way, regarding John Edwards' mention of the Beverly Hills Hilton Hotel, that's where, in July 2008, John Edwards visited Rielle Hunter. Their baby was there too. So too, the National Enquirer. The headline in the July 21st National Enquirer, Senator John Edwards caught with mistress and love child. John Edwards was accused of accepting $1 million from two wealthy donors to hide his pregnant mistress. On May 31st, 2012, a mistrial was declared in the case. Here's John Edwards speaking outside the Greensboro, North Carolina courthouse.
While I do not believe I did anything illegal or ever thought I was doing anything illegal, I did an awful, awful lot that was wrong. And there is no one else responsible for my sins. None of the people who came to court and testified are responsible. Nobody working for the government is responsible. I am responsible. And if I want to find the person who should be held accountable for my sins, honestly, I don't have to go any further than the mirror. It's me. It is me and me alone.
Okay, Roxanne Roberts, The Washington Post, John Edwards, and Rielle Hunter.
I don't know. This one makes me pretty sad in a lot of ways. Elizabeth had cancer, died from that disease. I believe him when he said that he really, really loved his wife. I'm sure he did. Nonetheless, he chose to have an affair that ended up with, this illegitimate child. I think Hunter was certainly in love with John. I think Rielle was in love. There were lots of stories that he had promised to marry her after Elizabeth died. And the whole thing is just deeply unsavory. It's also, to me, sort of a Shakespearean tragedy. Edwards was this very charismatic, young, fighting for the poor politician. He came from a very poor area, and he articulated in very vivid terms the fight between the haves and the have-nots very early on, something that we're still struggling with. And ran for president. He was on the vice presidential ticket because of that message with John Kerry. And then he ran for president. And I think it all, again, what we're talking about, it just went to his head. He kind of thought, well, these rules don't quite apply to me, and it's harmless, except it wasn't. Sometimes maybe it is harmless. It certainly wasn't in his case. Now, there is a full-throated taking of responsibility here that you don't see with anybody else.
Right.
And it killed his political career. He still has a legal career. But I felt as if nobody ended up well in this. Certainly not his family, not Edwards, not Hunter, not even their daughter. I mean, the whole thing is just kind of a mess. And I look at it with sadness for it. But it also was a massive scandal at the time because of the original, again, all the original denials. No, it's completely untrue. Finally, he was forced to admit because the evidence was right there in the pages of the National Enquirer. But I view all of this as people put their hopes in a young, charismatic politician who failed them. Not just everybody ended up in this is instead of the happy ending, this is the sad ending, I think, for everybody.
And by the way, he does your point that a full-throated admission of him being wrong is so interesting in this context. He also uses language we've heard prior that I didn't do anything illegal, I just did something wrong. And it seems the threading the needle of that in a way that I didn't break a law, but I shouldn't have done it.
The issue that we are dealing with and continually dealing with as voters is that people like to make this distinction between a legal crime and a moral failing. And what Americans, I think, care more about is the moral failing. Now, we're going to get to Donald Trump, and that's a different question because he is unlike any politician Americans have voted for before. But as a general rule, morals matter to Americans because I think we're all imperfect human beings. We fail a lot. But the people we vote for, we want them to be better than we are. We trust them when they say they are good people, that they're honorable people, that they're moral people. And that's the kind of person, like I want a person who's better than I am as president of the United States. I want someone who's smarter and works harder than I am and is kinder and overall is just a better person than I am. And I may not be perfect, but I would very much like that person to be perfect. And so I think that there's always this, aside from the judgment, there's also a disappointment. Like, oh man, he could have been great, except he wasn't, And I really still, I'd like to think that we can kind of put sex aside, but we don't, because it's part of this larger picture of, can you trust this person?
Okay, you mentioned Donald Trump. We'll get to him in 1 second. But first, Roxanne, let's take a hike on the Appalachian Trail.
Let's not.
Let's not. Well, let's at least bring in former Republican South Carolina Governor Mark Sanford.
I've been unfaithful to my wife. I developed a relationship with which started as a dear, dear friend from Argentina. It began very innocently, as I suspect many of these things do, in just a casual email back and forth, in advice on one's life there and advice here. But here, recently, over this last year, it developed into something much more than that. And as a consequence, I hurt her, I hurt you all, I hurt my wife, I hurt my boys.
That was Governor Sanford, June 24th, 2009, speaking to reporters from his office at the South Carolina State House. The dear friend from Argentina was Maria Belén Chapur, an Argentine journalist. Governor Sanford was asked about his 6 days of absence earlier that month. One of the excuses offered by the governor's spokesperson was that Mark Sanford was hiking the Appalachian Trail.
Did you intentionally mislead your staff about hiking the trail? Did you intentionally mislead your staff about where you were? Did you talk to them at any point when you were in Argentina, your staff?
Yeah, in other words, I called them back on Monday.
But when you left, did you intentionally?
No, we talked about that. In other words, let me be clear. I said that was original possibility. That, again, that is my fault in shrouding this larger trip. That's my fault. That's my fault.
Did you tell your staff to tell the press that you were hiking the Appalachian Trail?
I didn't tell them. I just said, hey, guys, this is where I think I'm going to go.
Okay, Roxanne Roberts, Mark Sanford.
The Appalachian Trail became, a joke for 6 months, a year? As euphemisms go, it sounds unpleasant. But I think Sanford's an interesting case because I am willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he fell in love with this woman, really fell in love with this woman. It's the first case where you think, I think this guy fell in love and was sort of swept away. Now, The larger question is if you are governor of a state, do you have the luxury of being swept away? And the answer is probably not. And the larger question is can you disappear for 6 days and nobody know where you are? And the answer is absolutely not. So here's a guy who kind of, I'm not saying that these were not all conscious choices, because I think that in many ways they were, but they were all bad choices. It was just like, it was so dumb. It was, I can see someone going, oh my God, I've fallen in love with this woman. What am I going to do now? And most people were not, well, I'm going to sneak away to another country and have my staff explain that I'm hiking the Appalachian Trail, which I might have been because I kind of thought about it, and then I decided to go to Argentina instead. So it's this kind of, maybe I can get away with this and no one will know. And politicians in this day and age particularly do not have the luxury of sort of a private life. Every place you go, everything you do, there's a possibility of now being recorded and photographed. And so he was just kind of insane to think that maybe he could hide this. Now, this relationship ended up finally, I think they both fell in love with each other, and it eventually fell apart. She was down there. He wanted to make sure he was close to his sons. It ended up badly. And then his name, again, has now surfaced with Olivia Nuzzi, the one we talked about in the beginning. There's not been any particular confirmation of that, but his name has surfaced, another person that she profiled. So her ex-fiance is alleging that she also had a relationship with him. So I think this is a guy who kind of thought he could live the life of a private person while being governor, and he's just wrong, And I think it's sort of a hard reality that if you choose to go into public service, if you choose to go into elected office, you give up virtually all your privacy at this point. You just don't. You shouldn't have any expectations of that, and you should assume that that is what your life is like all the time, and that is not fun. I think there are reasons that some people don't run for office simply because they don't want to give up that much of themselves, but there are other people who are called to it and driven to it, and the price of that is that you don't get to have a private life. And you certainly don't get to disappear for 6 days to hang out with your mistress without the world passing some serious judgment about it.
Before we get to our final example with Roxanne Roberts, the Washington Post, it just occurred to me, with Mark Sanford, it is our second time he's involved with somebody from Argentina on your list, because Fanny Fox, the Argentine firecracker. So
well, he wasn't, but this is the second time that two very compelling women from Argentina played into these scandals. So good on Argentina. I guess the women of Argentina have a little something going on that maybe we could learn from. But in any event, jokes aside, it was again, this usually doesn't work. I mean, if I was being the mom to all these guys, I would say, guys, this is not going to turn out well. I mean, I know it sounds like it's going to be fun, but I promise you it's not going to end well. It's not going to end well for you. It's not going to end well for your families. It's not going to end well for these women that you get involved with. So maybe take up golf.
Well, we're going to end with Donald Trump and Stormy Daniels. Here's President Trump, May 4th, 2018, talking with reporters at Andrews Air Force Base.
Mr. President, when did you change your story on Stormy?
We're not changing any stories. All I'm telling you is that this country is right now running so smooth, and to be bringing up that kind of crap and to be bringing up witch hunts all the time, that's all you want to talk about. You're going to see, excuse me.
You did not know
no, but you have to, excuse me, you take a look at what I said. You go back and take a look. You'll see what I said.
You said no.
Excuse me, you go take a look at what we said. But This is a witch hunt like nobody's ever seen before. And what they should do is look at the other side, where terribly bad things have happened, where terribly bad things have been done.
That was 2018. On May 30th, 2024, Donald Trump was found guilty on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records related to a hush money payment made to Stormy Daniels. It was the first time in history that a former U.S. president was convicted on criminal charges. Donald Trump denied having sex with Daniels and pleaded not guilty to the charges. After the verdict, Donald Trump held a press conference at Trump Tower in New York City.
But with these people, they were able to use people salacious. By the way, and nothing ever happened. There was no anything. Nothing ever happened, and they know it. But they were as salacious as they could be, and it had nothing to do with the case, but it had to do with politics.
Okay, Roxanne Roberts of the Washington Post, Donald Trump, Stormy Daniels is your final example on your list in the Washington Post.
Well, let's make a couple of things clear about why this is different from all the rest of them. First of all, at the time of the alleged encounter, Donald Trump was a private citizen. Stormy Daniels was a consenting partner, or allegedly consenting, according, she had some doubts. The marquee quote of hers about the encounter was, "It was the worst 30 seconds of my life." So you could argue that the mistake here was not the infidelity, that he was a private citizen, and the infidelity was in fact between Donald Trump and his wife and Stormy Daniels. What created the scandal here was when he decided that he wanted to be president of the United States, he realized that he had a possible problem. And the solution to that was to pay hush money and do it in such a way that he could become criminally liable for it. So there's the sex. And now this is an interesting thing because it's almost like a parallel to the Clinton thing, where there was the sex and then there was lying about the sex. And in this case, there was the sex and then there was the hush money payment for the sex, which ended up causing the scandal and the legal. And I don't know if there had never been the need, I'm not suggesting here that in his mind it wasn't a reasonable thing to do to try to quash that story. What I'm saying is that the decision to try to quash that story by making a payment and doing it in the way that ended up being disastrous for him all stemmed from the fact that he had cheated on his wife.
We talked happy ending earlier with Newt Gingrich. I don't know if it applies here, but he did get reelected, and he is still married.
He is still married. Now, we could do another podcast on political marriages. That's a different podcast and a complicated subject. How he has behaved, or for her part, how the First Lady has behaved, is between the two of them. I think we all know that marriage is a very complicated thing, and nobody understands it except the two people in it. Mm-hmm. We can make conjectures about that. What I think is interesting about the president is that many of his voters, including many who are very devout Christians and have a very strong sense of moral right and wrong, have been willing to set aside a number of his transgressions, sexual, financial, and others, because they believe in him, and I think that's probably the most interesting question when we go historically down this road, is to say, what was it about Donald Trump that made people willing to make an exception about the behaviors that they harshly judged in previous politicians but were willing to overlook in his particular case? I have theories. I do not have an answer. I don't think we'll know. It will take a while for people to understand that. There are people who are much more astute about politics who have said some extremely interesting things. But I think the one thing that we can say is that the people who love Donald Trump have been willing to give him a pass in ways that other politicians have not had.
Roxanne Roberts of the Washington Post, thank you for joining us here on the Extreme Mortman podcast.
You're welcome. It was interesting. I mean, all of this stuff is extremely interesting.
Well, great history for everybody. Thank you very much, Roxanne.
Okay.